Welcome to CNT Collectibles. I am C. Hope you're doing very, very well. Today, wanted to go over a few MLB players that may exceed our expectations in 2022. This was something that Dakota and I talked about last week. Didn't quite make it to the show. We're having a good time with other things, and thought, well, what the heck? Since I put this together, let's just throw it out here today anyways. And so, just to kind of make a stock market analogy, there's expectations for companies. You have earnings estimates. Keep in mind the estimates part of that. But when you get to the actual earnings release, if the numbers are wildly different, then this is when you can see some of the biggest moves in a name. And perhaps this translates to sports cards, fantasy baseball, that kind of good stuff as well. And so this is something that I'm going to put out now. We'll do it again closer to the season and see if there's anything to it. But essentially what I'm looking at is we do have a market for players, and that is fantasy baseball drafts, which are happening right now. They're just getting started. And again, more data will come in over the next few months, and we'll see what happens with the actual baseball season. And we also have the projections for the fantasy baseball. So I use this off of Fangraphs. I take one of their projection systems, I load in a fantasy scoring system, and so what you can come up with is where are people drafting players? Where are the projections saying they are? And so, the market's positioned differently to extremes on some players, and maybe there's something to be done with that. So, for example, Fernando Tatis and Juan Soto, these are kind of your first two guys off the board. If they finish anything outside of that, wildly different, if they're, not even top 10, then you could see big drops in their cards, right? The expectations were not met. But if there's people that were being drafted as, the 50th, well, Vlad Guerrero last year. This was a player that wasn't going off the board incredibly early, but he had a top 3 season, you could argue, and his prices went up accordingly. So you could have some of those surprises. So let's just get into it here and I'll explain it a little bit more as we go along. So we'll start off with some of the bigger differentials and we'll move our way down. So German Marquez, I don't know. 2022, he's currently being drafted in CBS leagues as player 260 overall, using the ZiPS-based player rank. So I'm just applying a fancy scoring thing, basically a point for good things and minus a point for bad things, and you can rank all the players based off that. So this is not scientific by any stretch here. Grain of salt, all that kind of good stuff. There's your disclaimer. 2022 ZiPS baseball rank, he says 63rd player overall, so it's a pretty large differential, 197 spots between where people think he is and where the projection systems feel that he could finish. And if that happens, then you could see a rise in his card prices. You could get a sneaky benefit in fantasy baseball drafts. Use this however you want. So why don't the drafters like him? He pitches in Coors. He's got a 500 win-loss record, so you're not getting the fantasy points for wins. You're losing some for the losses, and you're not an elite K guy, so that that strikeout to base on ball ratio is at about 15%. We want to see it at 20% or higher. So striking out, 8.5 per game and walking 3.5 per game is not the most exciting thing in the world. But why do the projections like him? The 4.5 ERA is countered with a 3.64 xFIP, so he's pitching better than the scorebook would show. He's got a 69% left on base, which means more players than average for the most part. 80% left on base is kind of your average. So 70% roughly of people that get on base stay there. So there's room for him to improve and keep it up to maybe 80% of guys left on base. Now his stats going back a few years, his personal stats, this is kind of where he's at. So maybe there's something in the projection systems that they're missing. Walked more guys than he has in his career, about a 3.5% clip, or 3.5 per 9, and he's usually kind of in that 2 area there. So if there's some improvement in these 2 areas, then this could be a player that markedly improves from where the people are drafting him from. So it could be a market surprise to the upside. All right, Miggy Sano is being taken off the board at number 275 overall, and Fangraphs has him at the number 78 position based on their projections. So that's nearly a 200 spot differential. So another big differential for a guy that can hit some bombs. He could be pretty relevant here. So why the drafters don't like him? 135 games played in 2021. That is a career high for him. So being a Twins fan, I see him in Buxton. These were the 2 guys to be the face of the franchise, and they can't quite stay on the field about half the time. Strikes out over 30% of the time. So why do the projections, where's this discrepancy coming from? Why do the projections like him? they're projecting relative health. If he can play another 140, roughly 140 games played, then he can repeat those numbers. 240 with 30 plus home runs, which is not fantasy irrelevant, and honestly, card irrelevant. I mean, you get 30 home runs, you're going to get a few eyes there. So 117 miles per hour maximum exit velocity, which is his career high. So he's getting some old man strength here. Optimal launch angle around that 18% area, and 50% of his balls are categorized as hard hit. Low soft contact. And he doesn't swing at a lot of balls out of the zone. So for a person that strikes out as much as he does, he's able to take a walk, and he doesn't have prolonged slumps. He's able to get out of it relatively quickly because he understands the strike zone to an extent. So again, with health, can this be a guy hitting 230, 240 with 35 home runs? That is relevant in fantasy cards, whatever. So not a long-term hold by any stretch here. So these are just guys that could surprise the market a little bit, and you can maybe get a bit of a pop off of it here. So Josh Bell, 2022 draft position 128. Fangraphs Zips running the numbers has him ranked at number 41 overall. It's an 87 spot differential. Why the drafters don't like him? Below elite bat every year except for 2019. Where he had that monster year with 135 weighted runs created. Increased ground ball percent over the last couple of years. People are still probably burned from 2020, which isn't terribly fair in that shortened sample size here. And they'd like to see a little bit more out of the first base position. There's other players to get before Josh Bell for the most part. So even though he might be the 41st player ranked overall, you might have to reach for a second baseman or a pitcher or something like that. So putting in the context of fantasy, you have to think of that as well. Why the projections do like him. Very elite plate presence. He walks 11% of the time, strikes out below 20% of the time. In 2021, he struck out 26% of the time, which was a bit of an outlier for him. He doesn't really get up above 20%, so we're expecting that to come back into his normal range, which will help quite a bit here. So 115 miles per hour maximum exit velocity. If half the balls he hits are categorized as hard hit, and he only swings at 27% of balls out of the zone. He's a very good plate presence, and in that 26% strike rate may be a bit of an outlier, and that's not an insignificant deal. So again, a top end first baseman, probably not for the most part here. You're looking at those guys that hit 35, 40 home runs if you can, but a very solid player that's had some good years, shown he can do it. Perhaps he can do it again and catch people off guard. Matty Chapman, all right, 2022 draft position, 188. Fangraphs Zips has him at the 112th player overall, which isn't great overall. So, once you start to get to a certain level, you could have guys that are projected to be 500 or 400th overall, and in the fantasy projections say, this is the 200th guy overall. They're kind of irrelevant at that point here. So big differential, but it may not matter a whole lot. So he started out his career on fire. I think there was a lot of hype last couple of years. Injuries, things of that nature have taken him off the beaten path. So maybe this is the year he gets back on. Let's see with some health. That could be the big one. Why drafters don't like him? Striking out over 30% of the time over the last 2 years, which is not him. The lowest exit velocity and hard hit percent of his career over the last couple, and he's increased his launch angle and fly ball percent, so he's trying to put the ball in the air and get it out of the park more. But if you are not hitting the ball as hard, as consistently, and you have a lower exit velocity than you have in your career, that's not a great combination. You deserve a lower batting average with that combination of things here. So the BABIP is going to be a little bit off, and a lot of those fly balls that used to leave the park are going to be caught. So why the projections do like him? Is he getting healthy? That's really the big thing with him. Can he get back to what he was a couple of years ago? He's got a good command of the zone with a career average of 25% outside the zone. He doesn't chase a whole lot of stuff. And he had a career low contact of balls in the zone last year. So can he fix that? Doesn't swing into much stuff out of the zone. Can he catch up to the stuff in the zone? And I think you could see a nicer rebound for Matt Chapman if those two things do come to fruition. All right, Jared Walsh, 2022 draft position 116. Fangraphs Zips has him at 52nd overall for a 64 spot differential. Why the drafters don't like him? Prove it. He's been really good for a year. It's actually 2 years, but one was a short sample size here. Why the projections like him? He can probably prove it. So elite level weighted runs created over the last couple of years. He's increased his maximum exit velocity to 114 miles per hour. So if you're looking for a 30-plus home run guy, you want to see a nice charge to the ball when he puts his bat on it, and he's doing that. More line drives and realistic home run to fly ball rate. This was a player we had in our regression series who had the higher home run fly ball rates, and what he's doing is actually pretty sustainable. So do it again, and I think next year he'll climb into that top that top 50 player, but he could be worth it this year, and he's not being drafted or regarded as such. Alex Bregman, personal favorite here, so don't let my bias don't let my bias show here. So these are just the numbers. 2022 draft position, 85 overall. Zips has him as the 35th best player overall for a 50 spot differential. Why the drafters don't like him? It was a weak 2020, and he was hurt in 2021. That's always a concern. Can he stay on the field? If he can, he is an MVP level bat when healthy. He's an elite plate presence, elite hard hit contact, smokes the ball when it gets when it's in the zone. It doesn't miss a whole lot, and really for him it's about health. So I put in a number of guys here, and today I was kind of planning on a mail day, and that was the first one I mailed in right there. Just be healthy and you're good. So apologies for that, but he's on the list. But again, his card prices at least are about as low as we've seen for a while, and if he can surprise people this year, he's kind of basically being disregarded. And if you can see him be a top, for bat purposes, top 10, top 15 guy, then that could catch people off guard, and you could see some of those prices lift again. So 2022 draft position for Mr. Carlos Correa, number 100 overall, ranked 43 spots ahead of that for the most part here. Why don't drafters like him? 148 games played last year was the most since 2016, not the most healthy track record for him. So why the projections do like him? Well, basically they're expecting him to play roughly 140, 150 games this year, and if he does, well, you saw what he did last year. No reason he can't do it again this year. Though in percentage terms, he's been kind of the same player. It's really come down about health and games played. So back-to-back mail days for you. There it is. There's me mailing it in. All right, 2022 draft position for Mr. Nolan Arenado, 63rd overall. Base is fantasy projections have him as the 46th best player overall. So drafters don't hate him by any stretch there, but there's a pretty decent differential. Just looking at his cards, it seems like they should probably get a lift, and maybe this is what does it for him. Why the drafters don't like him? He's not in Coors anymore, pulls more balls in the air for similar results than what he's had over his career. So he's having to put both cheeks into it to get similar results. Heavy pull percentage, so really has to put it in the air and down the line to get his numbers. Why the projections do like him? Walks 8% of the time, strikes out 15% of the time. That is an elite number, and add power into that, and that's really one of your top echelon guys. 2049 BABIP, near his 2020 career low. Well, if he's going to keep putting balls in the air and with a declining hard hit percentage, then they're not going to leave the park with as much frequency as they had in the past, and that is going to that BABIP is true. Now, if he's able to hit more line drives, he can correct that, get back up to that 280 level. And increase his overall numbers just a bit here. So his offense is no longer elite. If you look at the offensive wins that Fangraphs assigns players, he was good for 20 or 30 more runs than your average third baseman over the course of his career. Now he's above average. Now he's worth about 10 more runs. So it's still above average, but it is not at that elite level. Again, he's going to have to hit some more line drives, I think, if he wants to get back to that. And Matty Olson, 2022 draft position, 42 overall. Fantasy projections has him as top 18. Really, he's a top 10 bat, top 5, top 2 or 3 first baseman for the most part. 24 spot differential, so I think the market's they're not too far off here on that one really. But why the drafters don't like him? They're dumb basically. But his soft career high, his soft contact was a career high 19% in 2021. So if he can just start to hit the ball with a little more consistency, he'll be all right. But he did drop that strikeout rate to sub 20%, which is dangerous. If you can hit 40 home runs roughly, well, striking out 15% of the time, walking 10% of the time, it does make you a top 2 or 3 player at your position, which is what he was last year. So this might actually be a bit more of a cautionary tale. What are people thinking he can do? Top 2 or 3 at the position, he can probably do that again. But if he falls outside of that, that might be not great for his cards, even though he's having a terrific season. Why the projections do like him? Again, anything close to that 20% strikeout makes him elite. 115 mile per hour maximum exit velocity was his career high, and he's a hard hit monster. He's right around that 50% area for the last couple of years, and he's making a ton of contact in the zone. So that eye surgery has seemed to pay it off. Let's see if he can do it again. But again, one of those risks is that if they expect you to be top 3 and you're top 5, that's not going to help. If you're top 3 and you're first, there's very little room to go up at his point. So he looks awesome. I think maybe the drafters kind of have it right. You don't have to fine tune it too much here. Pete Alonso, drafting top 50 overall. The player rank has him top 35 overall. So again, minor difference here. Why don't the drafters like him? They obviously hate polar bears, but why do the projections like him? Walking 10% of the time, striking out 20% of the time for a power guy. That's pretty elite stuff here. And he's been an elite level bat each of the first full season in terms of weighted runs created. 118 maximum exit velocity. Really, you have Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton above that. Vlad might be right in there as well. Similar fly ball percentage that he's had the first 3 years, but his home run to fly ball percent was the lowest of his career. So he's hitting the ball in the air as much as he ever has, but they weren't leaving the park at the same rate. You can see an increase in home runs, and if people, they kind of have him off their radar, but if he winds up being a top 5 first baseman overall, that could be a nice return for draft position in fantasy drafts and buying his cards right now. You could probably get a little bit of lift as people are a little bit surprised by the when the rubber meets the road here. So I think we've got one more here. We do, and that is Mr. Yordan Alvarez. You might think this is Houston heavy, and it kind of is, but Correa's not technically an Astro right now, I don't believe. Or maybe he technically is, but he's going to get traded. So really only 2 for sure, right? All right, 2022 draft position, 28th overall. Player ranked 16 overall. Not a huge discrepancy, honestly. Why the drafters don't like him? Knees. He could be hurt. So at any time here, but these things have a tendency to not happen at times. Chris Sale was supposed to have his arm blown out. He came up in 2010, 2011, and he was supposed to be a candidate for like immediate arm surgery, and it took a while before he got to that. So Yordan Alvarez, he could go for a while before it really becomes a problem here. So why the projections do like him? He's a top 10 bat overall for the most part. Elite level weighted run created each year in the bigs is high teens and maximum exit velocity. So this is a guy that can thump the ball. 50% of the balls he hits are hard. He had very little soft contact, and 90% of the balls in the zone he just crushes. And so again, this is a player that there's the legitimate concern that he gets hurt at any time, which will kill his value. But should he stay healthy, he is a top 10 type bat. And so he does this for a few years. His cards will reach a little higher level here, but for now they're kind of chopping around with the rest of them. But if he can separate himself with the pack by staying healthy and continue to mash the ball like he does, then there's some opportunity there. So that's what I got for you. I hope you have a great rest of the day, and we will talk to you later. Bye.